Hi, Brittany.
Karen, how are you?
I'm good. Welcome everybody back to the E word.
Yes, yes.
So a lot has been happening, as
Yes.
usual.
hmm
Um, that's what we live off of.
The world is keeping us very busy. That's
That's
true.
busy. So okay, what's happening in the world today? I mean, there's so many different things, but
I have one thing, and then I'm going to hand it to you because I know you've been keeping a closer eye. So, as of today, we see that there are 88 CEOs. You know, I'm always keeping an eye on things, all things leadership.
yep.
88 CEOs have come out to endorse a presidential candidate. And these are CEOs from organizations like Starbucks. Um, I'm thinking, I want to say maybe it was Lowe's. I don't want to misquote. Nevertheless, there's 88 of them. And yeah, it's for Kamala Harris. So this is pretty unique, I would say. I don't recall seeing something like this for previous election cycles. What are your thoughts, Karen?
It's always interesting when you see companies get involved in politics, right?
Mm-hmm.
The why is usually it's because it's to protect their business in some meaningful way, right? And when they came out for Kamala, it's sending a message that they believe Kamala is good for business, right?
Yeah.
And um, I'm sure she is, right, from that corporate standpoint for lots of different reasons based on her policy. I think she's also good for business in that representation piece, right? In terms of,
Mm,
demonstrating that people of color, right? The crux of, not the crux, but an underpinning of DEI, right? That's the argument that we've had to make over and over again, that DEI is not just ethically good, but it's also good for business. I'm not
mm-hmm.
calling Kamala a DEI candidate. So I just want to make sure that's clear because she is a well rounded person that has lots of attributes and has proven herself on the business and political front for decades upon decades. But I don't want to ignore what that representation also means in and of itself because
Right.
we haven't seen something like this ever, right? And
Yeah.
while the campaign, rightly so, does not talk about race and gender, that doesn't preclude me from talking about it because it is visual for us to see.
Sure. Absolutely. And, I mean, I think markets like stability,
Mhm.
right? And we see, if anything, how these leaders are perceiving the stakes in this election, right? And we've spoken about ever since 2016, I think, we've had this discourse about the role of politics in the workplace because we know that on a micro scale, employees are engaging in these discussions. And as time's gone on, we've seen that organizations are increasingly asking uh, or audiences within organizations are increasingly asking for leadership to take a stand on certain issues. And so then there comes the question of, the role that politics has in leadership, the role that politics has in, um, really at work, right? And we have the advent of corporate social responsibility, and we see that corporations are now more than ever being asked to take a stand, being asked to be very vocal about where they stand, whether it's for a presidential candidate or whether it's supporting a specific initiative. And so to see 88 CEOs stand up and say, hey, we believe this person more closely aligns with what we stand for within this organization, what we stand for when it comes to financial performance and our ability to withstand whatever's happening in the economy at any given time, who we are putting our vote behind, and who we as leaders are entrusting with the role of leadership, within the highest office in the United States is pretty telling. But at the same time, we see we see that just as loudly as many of these CEOs are speaking about who they support politically, we also see there are many organizations and the choices that they're making when it comes to the initiatives that they're backing within their organization, and that's equally, if not more so, telling. So what are your thoughts about that? What can we tell viewers?
I think the one thing that I want to stick on is
Mm-hmm.
what we have seen in a past administration is that the constant instability of the political atmosphere caused a lot of uncertainty in the markets and people's jobs, right? It just
Mm-hmm.
created this tension point. I remember in 45's presidency, I've never watched so much cable news in my entire life. It was just
Maybe not the best for your nervous system, but I understand.
every single day from the moment
Mm-hmm.
I woke up, and I don't even know if I probably missed most of prime time. It was insane because I needed to know what was going on. And it was in some ways must see TV. You missed a day, you missed a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not what's supposed to happen in society, at least by my standards, right? The angst and the stress of what chaos is going to happen today, right? And so that stability and balance is really important for people to just be able to focus on what they need to do next, whether it's today, whether it's tomorrow. And if you're worried about, um, you know, whether you're going to have health insurance or job security or all these different, you know, policies that affect you as the average day-to-day Joe, and it's always up in the air and it's always chaos, you never feel stable in your day-to-day.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't allow a leader to take full advantage, right, of your talent and capabilities because you're dealing with constant flux. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's really important for leaders to understand not only what their role is in their day-to-day jobs, but how they influence society. And so
Mm-hmm.
when these 88 CEOs come out and they stand for something, I actually just wanted to just call out some of them so people understand that it's these big, meaningful corporations.
Large companies, absolutely.
The list includes Yelp, Fox, Ripple, former CEOs of Pepsi, Lyft, Ford, Starbucks, as you said, James Murdoch, Magic Johnson, and so many more. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's a really big statement to say, hey, look, we want stability. We believe
Right.
in what VP Harris stands for when it comes to our people and society.
And really interesting because she's been criticized for not being specific about policy, right? And so I think that is in the face of that criticism to see these leaders come out and say, hey, based on what I've heard, based on what's been represented, this is preferable to other options that we've been presented with. We're willing to, as so much of leadership requires, we're willing to trust.
Right. Right.
We're willing to trust
Really.
that even if we don't have the specifics, which again, the policies, it seems to be detailed on the website, but if that's, if people were looking for something more specific, knowing that these people, these leaders of these huge companies are saying, you know what, we're good enough for us. Right?
Absolutely. And as leaders, we know that we don't always have all the answers right
Mm-hmm.
now, right away. Like in
Mm-hmm.
many ways, does it make sense? I mean, I know she's the VP right now, and so she
Right.
probably has a lot of the answers, but not all,
Sure.
right? But would it make sense for someone before they have a job, before they've dug into it, to have made all the decisions beforehand? Nobody does
Not
that.
at all. In fact, it's the to come into a job and say, okay, I know it, I've seen it all, I know it all, you know, and not have any sort of curiosity would be something that we would not respect. And so I think this is another example where we see um, we're not so much focused on the accuracy for this moment. We're focused on the decisiveness. What are the broad commitments that we can trust in? And I think that is really interesting and also a lesson for people who are currently in leadership or aspiring to it, especially women. Women very often undervalue their capabilities because they say, if I'm not 100% correct, I don't want to put myself in the position to be wrong. People need to know that you can make a decision and trust that you can be agile enough to respond to whatever comes your way after that decision's made.
Exactly. And what I love about what's happening also is the fact that as a woman, right, she is being trusted to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, and that's a big thing because, so, all right, on um, the night of the DNC when she was accepting her nomination, right,
Mm-hmm.
she was giving her speech and, you know, she was talking about herself and all the things that she was going to do. And it was in a very good way, but it was very bravado. It was very much in a way that we normally don't see
Mm-hmm.
women speak,
Right.
particularly Black women. And I
Mm-hmm.
have to be honest, I was like, oh, right? It was a little jarring for me. And I was like, why are you jarred? You would not be. I had to have a conversation with myself. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Just check yourself, right? Because
Yeah,
there's this
absolutely.
jarred. Like would you be jarred if it were a man? You expect of a man. And so sit in this moment and enjoy that moment because she is talking about herself, her accomplishments, what she will do for this country with vigor, with grace, right, and with confidence. That's something that you Karen, like I'm talking to myself, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's
Mm-hmm.
something that you do, right? You feel uncomfortable with sometimes. That's my problem, right? And so don't project that onto her. And I had to have that quick conversation with myself so I can be in that moment and I can accept it. And
Mm.
that's something I think that we all need. Like we
Yep.
don't see that as often, and that's why I think I was like, "Oh,
You know what that's called, Karen?
what is it called?"
Tall poppy syndrome. Have you heard of it?
No, what is that?
Quick digression, and then we're back because there are a few companies that we need to point out. So tall poppy syndrome, it tends to be experienced by women in leadership like yourself. Um, but it's a space where you have had the experience of being belittled, mocked, and or ridiculed for being a highly confident and or high achieving person. And
Mhm.
so with tall poppy syndrome, you're a tall poppy and therefore you become a point of attraction for being systemically cut down.
Mm.
And so many tall poppies internalize that as a form of self-protection because they have the experience of having their, um, someone else taking credit for their work, other people having left them out purposely, having been ignored, having been told they were too much, having been passed over for promotions because their success is perceived as a threat, and especially for women because we aren't accustomed to women being in leadership and most importantly being confident in that leadership, right? Where we tend to value humility and the pursuit of likability above all in women. So when we see her doing that, we're like, oh, you know, a friend of mine has a phrase, I think that person likes themselves a bit too much. And so because you're a self-actualized person, you took that as a moment to reflect and go within and say, oh, why am I uncomfortable with that? Whereas a lot of other people would see that display of confidence and say, I don't like that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I don't like it. That tall poppy's got to be cut down.
See, I always learn something. So in Jamaica, we would say them chest high. Okay.
I thought that was what is it? Big up yourself. But okay, I like it. Them chest high. Okay.
Just high. A whole bunch of body language with it, but that's all right. That's
see, I'm learning as well. Anyone listening, watching, you see what happens when you tune into the E word?
But no, that's crazy that it's a syndrome, right? Mm-hmm. I'm sure a lot of people felt that way, and hopefully they turned it in on themselves and they hopefully did what I did. But the other point, and we want to go on to the other thing, is that, she's been being asked to explain herself and prove her points when the other candidate is not doing so, right?
Unchecked,
talking pure foolishness. All right.
Completely.
Okay, but it's okay. But we need, again, that's the disparity that we need to recognize, right? And uplift, point out and uplift when we see those types of things. We have to call it out. So these are just the challenges that we as Black women go through on a regular basis. Right? And of course, when we call it out, then that's a problem, but we still need to do so. But again, it's great to see that these CEOs are using their power and their privilege, right, to endorse this candidate and work in the best interest of course, my view, work in the best interest of society and their own workforce.
And knowing that likely in order to do so, they're being backed by their boards. Right? So it's not just them. It's, you have key stakeholders, the people who we may never see, unless we're looking at a prospectus, knowing that they too have put their support behind the CEO to be the voice and to speak on behalf of their interests as well. And it makes it all the more uncomfortable when we see some other CEOs doing the exact opposite, not in endorsing a candidate, but in rolling back their articulated commitment to creating inclusive environments, to committing to developing equity within their organization and inviting diverse talent into their organizations. So I was just looking at my phone. You sent me something about but you sent me a few, and it's upsetting. It's very upsetting.
Harley Davidson, Lowe's, Tractor Supply, and then most recently Moore's, right? Yes. The Moore's, what's it called? Oh my gosh, I just totally blanked.
Coors Light.
Coors Light, sorry.
Yep.
Moore's Company or something. And okay, here's the thing. You could not have been truly committed to it in the first place to be able to so easily roll it back. That's just my first assertion. It was one of those things that probably need to go do a little deep dive on that. But in my view, right, something that is embedded within your organization, you just can't cut off.
Mhm.
And it's really interesting that all of these companies are also pulling back, who had perfect scores on the Human
Mhm.
Equality Index, are pulling away from this benchmark as well.
Mhm.
And I wish I was an investigative journalist at this point, because as we
Pull out
started,
the magnifying glass. Yeah.
oh, totally. I started to rewatch The Newsroom, that HBO show with Jeff Daniels a long time ago,
Mhm.
which no one's seen it. You should. If you watch it again. It's just as relevant. And the fervor and rigor that these journalists went into to like uncover what was below the surface. And that's, I wish I was, because it feels really odd that all of them are pulling back their DEI practices and also moving away from the Human Equality Index. And it's not clear why. Companies like Coors Light are like, well, um, we're still going to sort of practice it, right? But basically not out loud. Like, it's not going to be called DEI. We're going
Similar
to,
to Zoom, where they said it's going to be in their DNA, but they'll just fire everyone who had anything to do with it.
yeah,
Hmm.
it's like that. It's just really icky. And it's like, okay, well, what is that saying to your workforce? What's that saying to people with different identities about how they're going to be treated in your organization?
So I'm going
That's
to
it.
ask a question, kind of a marketing question, but I'll borrow from, you know, I don't want to say playing the devil's advocate because it's so overused, but if I were arguing in defense of them, if I look at a Harley Davidson, for example, Davidson, excuse me. Nevertheless, if I say, well, from a marketing perspective, our target demographic is not in favor of these initiatives. So we are moving at a pace of which, we're trying to give our consumers what they want. What would your response to that be?
First, I would have to ask the definition of what DEI is, because that feels like code for certain groups of people, right? But that would be number one. But I just really find it hard to believe, and I don't care what the demographic is, right? That
Mm-hmm.
people are in favor of being included in the conversation, right? Of having the opportunity to purchase a motorcycle, right? With this fantastic brand associated with it. Um, I would ask questions about what their growth plans are. Do your growth plans include people with other identities, right? Because if it doesn't, then you'll probably fade away at some point in time, because our society is what, if you put women and people of color together, that's the majority, right? And so, are you saying you just want this niche? And this niche, that may be fine for you, but I'd have questions about where you thought your future is going to be, who you thought your demographic was, and how well you really know that demographic, right? So I don't know the demographic for Harley Davidson. I'm going to make an assumption from the movies that I have seen.
Mm-hmm.
So this is very sad
I've watched Sons of Anarchy. That's about it.
information. But I primarily see white males, like rural white males, on Harley Davidson, right? And there's a lot of them. Okay, so that might be fine. But wouldn't it be great to see rural white females, right? Wouldn't it be great to see city chicks, right? Riding your bicycle all over Manhattan or Boston or whatever, right? Like, wouldn't it be great to see other identities? But are they going to do it? Or
Right.
maybe the brand is strong enough to not have to. And maybe that's the calculation that they made, because they built this brand so deeply over time that it defies having to speak specifically to any audience whatsoever. I don't know enough about it, but these are questions.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking, how often are you buying a motorcycle? Is this once every 10 years purchase? Is this once every 5 years? Can you lease, etc.? But all great questions. And I think this also goes to the heart for anyone who's watching that's a consultant. This is part and parcel of why I will say for myself as a consultant, I've refused certain types of work because it was not, their DEI initiatives were not, the goal was not to have them become an integral part of their growth plan. The goal was not to have it become an integral part of the organization in the way that finance or marketing or, IT would be, which is or people operations, right? You have to have foundational understanding of this in order in the bedrock of the organization, right? It's not just this ornamental part that you can peel away at will. It has to be embedded in the bedrock. And, the thing that I've said, a 60-minute training is not a silver bullet. It's not going to save you.
No.
To say, oh, diversity is inviting everybody to the party, and, inclusion is inviting them to the dance floor, has no practical application to or meaning for the day-to-day operations within an organization. And that is a severe part of why there's been, while, there have been tons of DEI consultants, and I'm not coming at all of them, but a lot of it, I look at with a critical eye, because I say, what is the point?
Mm-hmm.
What is the point of that metaphor? How does that metaphor impact hiring? How does it impact performance reviews? How does it impact, what are your, how do you do your talent assessments?
Mm-hmm.
What's your strategic plan look like? What's your board makeup? Don't talk to me about a party. But, and I say that somewhat tongue in cheek, because we've all heard that. And we've walked out. Some people have felt really yummy and hopeful. Some people have felt resentful and excluded. And that's why we're here today.
That's so true. That is so true. Like, I have the same sentiment. Like, these, again, I'm not saying DEI trainings aren't important. I do believe they're important.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there's a different way to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You can't stick people in a room and say, hey, you need to start thinking this way. That doesn't work. The best DEI, in my view, is probably the most unsustainable one, which is connection to people, right? You have to get people talking and understanding life experiences. And that's tapping into the emotion, right? That's
correct.
Associated with an individual to get them to open their eyes. But like this one and done training, if there's no tactile element to it, right, it doesn't stick and it can resentful. Then you get, so Molson Coors also said is developing the next evolution of its company trainings, which will focus on key business objectives instead of its previously DEI-based training programs that the company said all current U.S. employees have already participated in. That last part is like, they already did it. It was a one and done.
Oh, I already know everything that I need to know about DEI, which is, of course, as we know, something that's constantly evolving to match the demands of the market. And I would say these people who are facilitating these trainings, if you don't have a grounding in adult learning, I would say if you've never taught a class, if you've never tried a case, If you don't understand how adults receive, retain, and interact with information, it's pointless.
100%. And most people, at least the way I approach this stuff, right, is they care about their day to day, right? And so
Right.
my focus is more on how do you make small shifts to your day to day. And this, I live in the world of marketing, right? So how do you make small shifts in your marketing practices day to day, not adding to your work? Well, in some cases, I might be a little bit, but I'm not trying to transform one big transformation. It's just small mindset shifts that you may have to think about eventually, in the beginning, but when you add it to your daily workflow, it's not something that you have to um, put major effort against, depending on what the situation is.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes part of your daily practice, and you're training yourself
Right.
to think differently over time. Because, look, I think the ultimate goal, grand goal, would be for DEI not to have to exist, right?
Right.
And so if companies can authentically get to that place, right, then that would be an incredible thing. I don't think that will ever happen because there's so many different ways to slice this, and we're a very biased society. It will be required in some way. Some awareness needs to be required in some way. But like, if you're a new company starting, for example, starting with DEI in mind is the
Mm-hmm.
way to maybe not need it later on. I'm thinking specifically of, say, Fenty, Rihanna's Fenty,
Yep.
right? That was built on the idea of inclusiveness. Now, I'm not
Correct.
saying DI has gone away for that. It is the focal point of this amazing brand that is meant to include everyone. And this is why it's gotten so big and so
Right.
grand so fast, and it will be sustainable.
Because you
Because
started with 40 plus skin tones, right? Shades for all skin types.
exactly.
You don't have to do this pivot, dedicate resources to expand because the marketing team, I would assume, looked around and said, okay, we have creators who've built whole audiences behind the fact that they just try the darkest makeup shade and just highlight how much of a need there is in the industry.
Yeah, exactly. There was this oh shoot, I'm gonna forget. I think I'm gonna call it Rhodes blush or something.
Yeah,
And
wrote. Mm-hmm.
Rhodes, you heard that
Mm-hmm.
story?
Yep.
So they made their palette, and a darker creator criticized them because when she put it on, it looked very ashy. But what they did do, which you have to commend them for, is all right, they made a mistake or wasn't inclusive, right? Didn't think about that, and reached out to her to have her collaborate on what that might look like, and probably others. I'm sure there's more than just her,
Correct.
right? Um, and then used her in the campaign. So they used her ideas, but also
Right.
leveraged her for the campaign, and I'm sure it compensated her very
And borrowed her audience that was loyal to her. So
well.
now, by transitive properties, they are now loyal to you,
Mhm.
right? And you have other instances of other makeup brands. I can't remember the brand now, but a similar creator, very heavily melanated, criticized them, and they released a foundation that essentially was akin to black paint.
Oh my gosh.
No thought, no care, and more focus on being defensive
Mhm.
and the collective ego than to be curious and engage and see that this is an opportunity. It's
Right.
not just a criticism. This is an opportunity for you to grow.
You can also make makeup for non-melanated people. Like I'm also in that camp because there's now makeup for melanated people.
Absolutely.
right? That's fine, you know, but like don't try and don't do it right.
Correct.
Just,
Don't just, if you're throwing out something, you say, here, like don't, that's not necessary. Um, but be clear and understand. And I think this is a challenge, and I'm curious to know what you think from a marketing perspective. It seems like certain brands, especially in an influencer economy, aren't confident enough in their strategy that they feel comfortable saying, well, that's just not what we do.
I think it's a tough time to say that. I think they can, I
Mm-hmm.
think, um, look, as a company have to have a vision of where you want to go, and you got to stand on business.
Mm-hmm.
Period.
And
Just what
say
I
no to everything that isn't that.
exactly. So like I said, the person, it's like they're like, no, these bikes are for this particular demographic. If other people buy that, cool, but we're not investing in that.
Mm-hmm.
That's their privilege to do so. No one's
Right.
forcing them to do that, right? And lean in to what that means. You
Mm-hmm.
cannot pretend to be for everybody and don't be for everybody,
Mm-hmm.
right? Serve your niche and serve it well. There are other competitors that are going to pop up, and you be prepared for backlash, just like you're prepared for praise, right?
Mm,
Somebody's going to love you, somebody's not. What is that going to look like to you? But have your values, have your response ready. Know that you're going to get some pushback and deal with it accordingly.
right.
I'm going to be extreme for a second. If you have, if you're exclusively making makeup for albino skin tones,
Mm-hmm.
and a very melanated creator is like, well, what about me? Right? You can be like, well, you've got this, and this. We're focused on this. We're about empowering this particular group that doesn't get much attention. That doesn't mean
And
you run.
so
That is something else. Stand on your business.
I love that. And bringing it back to these DEI initiatives, stand on your business. Because if you were committed then, why are you not committed now? What's changed? Because at some point, either you were never committed and you wanted to hop on a train, which means that you're inauthentic, which means that the trust is eroded in some way, or now something shifted for you within the environment. And I think it's important to be very clear about what that is, because if we're scared of lawsuits, and so we don't want to draw any particular attention. By not naming it, you're giving it power, right? You're giving the Edward Blums of the world power because you're not outright naming the strategy. Instead of saying, it's an ineffective use of our resources to have to fight these baseless claims, and in so doing, we found that it was easier to roll these things back, or to say we have to redirect resources to prepare for these baseless claims because this is what's happening.
I agree with you. You're scared, say you're scared. But do something about it. Like, I'm scared of really tall heights. I'm not doing it. I'm scared, right? So, what I would love to see leaders do though. So, yes, you're scared, say you're scared. If if you don't have the resources, you don't have the resources, right? Those are business decisions that you have to make. But there's another business decision I think leaders can make is understand again your privilege and power as a corporation.
Mm.
And you can fight the Edward Blums and the Robbie Starbucks of the world, which is the other contender that's taking credit for all DEI rollback programs. And because these are, at the end of the day, these are just two men. Obviously, they have their backings, but two men. And if these 88 CEOs, for example, got together and was like, yeah, we're going to come together in some sort of initiative, lawsuit, whatever it is. I don't know how that works. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Imagine what you could do to protect the workforce. It's always better to do things together.
Yes.
Right? And, obviously I would want these individual corporations who are making tons and tons of money. I know smaller ones, it's more difficult to dedicate resources to fighting the good fight and get in some good trouble. Right? So that's what I invite them to do. And whether they want to do it on their own or come together as a collective, you don't have to bow down. In fact, leadership is about finding a way. It is also about knowing when to stand down. Don't get me wrong.
Yes.
But I think that's only after you explore the ways.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So we'll see.
We will.
What happens next and who drops next? Okay, because it be like an ongoing trend. But we'll be talking about you. That's all I know.
We will. We will. We see you. We see you. I will not be having a Coors Light, and the next time that I have home improvement needs, I will not be going to Lowe's.
I don't think you can go to Home Depot either. We're in trouble.
Listen, I will do the work to find the lone mom and pop shop that's out there somewhere.
They're there.
Eking it out.
They're totally there. Wow. Well, until the next time somebody does something that we need to talk about on the E-word. See ya.
See you later.